Leviticus chapter 20. Now, Leviticus chapter 20 increases the severity. And it also repeats a little bit of Leviticus 18 in the later part of this chapter. But more importantly, that is a characteristic of chapter 20, is the severity of the requirement of an execution, to be cut off, to be stoned to death. And these these will indicate how serious God takes some of these activities that the children of Israel might do, and it is a severe warning. And some of these are not only just for Israel or children of Israel, it's also for those people who live with them. And we do see some of these repetition of some of the things that was said in passing in chapter 18 and 19, put together, and in chapter 20 comes a summary that God not only frowns upon such activities, that God puts a death penalty on them. And hence, this chapter is very severe. Something which everyone, not just the children of Israel, but everyone needs to pay attention to. Because as we have been doing the book of Leviticus, it is actually to look at the heart of God, look at the character of God, and what God considers light, what God considers severe, and why. And these are some of the things that we are seeing in chapter 20 that is really, really serious. But many of the things that has been said, that God says you do this and you shouldn't do that, and you can see from chapter 19, it is actually to show how the children of Israel is holy. So the focus is actually on the holiness of God. And it's not a trivial thing. And we may think that no, being holy is just, if you can, you can, you cannot, then no, well, God will just let it pass. But that's not how God looks at holiness. And holiness, remembering holiness being to be set apart, to be special, to be sacred, to be unique, to be recognized as being very different from the rest of the world. So let's take a look at chapter 20 and see why God treats these things as very severe. Now, this one tells us is, and then God, the Lord Jehovah, spoke to Moshe, saying, again means these are things that has been said before. And God says, one more time, right? One more time. And that would be the way that is described, right? You shall say to the children of Israel, and here goes the importance. It says here, whoever of the children of Israel, means that any man of the sons of Israel, any man, right? From the sons of Israel, or from the strangers who dwell in Israel. Remember in chapter 19 yesterday, we are to love the strangers, because we are to treat the strangers as one of the brethren, one of the natives who are born in the land, and to love the stranger as you love yourself. And in that same tone, God says, this instruction includes these strangers who dwell in Israel. So it's not anybody else. So these are the non-Israelites who are living amongst them. And this is the warning. The warning is, if you give any of his descendants, his seed, if you give any of your children, anyone down the line, and this is what it means when it says descendant, not just sons, right? Anyone down the line, the future generations as well, to Molech. Molech is a Ammonite god. Ammonite. And there were a number of places that actually worship this, and one of the things that you will find is that the descendants of Ammonite actually led King Solomon to do some of these things as well later on in First Kings. And he shall surely be put to death. Now, this word, surely be put to death, means to be stoned. So the people will die, will surely die, and the people of the land shall stone him with stones. And so this is, remember, there are two things that is mentioned here. The penalty is, one, he will surely die, and how they will die is stone him with stones. So this is 1 and 2, saying two things the same way. Okay. Now verse 3, this is part of the same passage, right? God says, I will set my face against that man. So we're talking about that man who give his descendants to Molech, right? And remember, to give is to, well, I guess, what should we say? To offer as a present, as a gift to the idol, right? And so when God says, I will set my face against that man or towards that man, it is a very serious idiom, right? It's an idiom. And that would mean that God is going to look angrily at that man. And God is saying, this person who gives his seed, his zerah to Molech, God will cut him off from his people. And you remember the word cut him off is literally to cut, to karat. It means to execute from his people, because he has given some of his descendants to Molech to defile, to make unclean. That's what it means to defile, tameh, to make unclean. My sanctuary, and that would be the tabernacle at that time, and profane. Profane is also to defile. To defile, and I think it would be to desecrate, to pollute, to make vile, to make God's name into a bad thing, right? And notice God refers to himself as my holy name. You see this? My sanctuary and my holy name, also referring to the presence of God, where God is in the sanctuary, and that is where God will place his name. And so this is again saying two things, but is referencing the same. It's about God, the presence of God, the character of God. That is what it means. If you give your seed to Molech, you are thumping your nose against God. You are you treat God as nothing, right? And God will be very, very angry. That's why it's to cut him off. And if the people of the land, the Israelites there, should in any way hide. Now, this is important. What do you mean by hide? It means to conceal. Conceal their eyes from the man. What do you mean conceal? I think if you look at it in today's terms, it would mean that they keep a blind eye, right? Keep a blind eye. You know that expression like 當睇唔到啦, and pretend he didn't see. And when he gives some of his descendants to Molech, and they do not kill him. Remember here it says, you will surely be put to death. Stone him. And these people pretend didn't see, so no need to do. Now God will say, then I will set my face against, see, this is the same thing. I will set my face against that man and against his whole family. And I will cut him off from his people, and all who prostitute themselves with him to commit harlotry. What does that mean, who prostitute themselves with him? Now, this is an expression that the English just, I guess, makes it sound a bit difficult here, okay? So basically, this one would mean that anyone who caused the man to do this, right? To do this with Molech. See, commit harlotry is also prostitution, right? Basically, cause a man to serve Molech, to serve an idol, to serve another god, and that would be what it says. If all those who would be party to him, right, God will cut them all off. You see, God is very angry when the people of Israel worship other gods. Remember when he came to the 10 Commandments, God already said, you shall have no other gods before me. Now, at this point in time, they haven't even entered into the land, and God is giving them a warning. Remember, this is a warning. You do this, you die. God is very serious because God says, I am a jealous God. Now, of course, in the 10 Commandments, he didn't say that I will put you to death. But here, clearly in an expansion of everything that he has said, do not have any other gods before me. God says, if you do that, that man and all those with you, God will cut. God will cut. God will execute. That's what it means. And so I think this is what it says, that if we are to understand God, then God is you can say that God is a jealous God. That he will guard his people. He wants his people to be single-minded and single-hearted towards him. That there should be no other gods. But if they do, and they serving other gods by giving, notice the word giving, offering. Maybe in the Chinese customs and thinking, it could be like no that you assign your son to one of the idols. So if any one of them give his descendants to Molech, that's it. God says, I am not going to even hesitate to do this to you. Now, this is a warning to tell them that it is very strict. But you know that God is not like, going to zap you with fire from heaven. Okay? So what does this mean is that anyone who is actually caught doing this, if they do not repent, they will be stoned to death. That is what it says. God is a fair God. God will give men a chance to repent. Of course, there are some instances like the situation in Exodus where they were worshipping the golden calf. You know, God destroyed them there and then. But very seldom God does that. And really, God is now warning them. And so God is not the kind of God that every time you do something wrong, there'll be fire from heaven. We have to understand that this is the heart of God. This is what God wants. This is who God is. God is a jealous God. You should have no other God. So don't even tempt God. Moving on to verse 6. Now we read some of these from yesterday. It says, do not turn. And the word turn is to really turn towards. Turn towards, meaning your movement, your face, your attention should not be turned away from God to two things here. To mediums and familiar spirits. So let's regain our thoughts again. Medium would be as a channel to the dead. Familiar spirits would be soothsayer, to tell you of the future, right? To be familiar, to tell you of yourself, to tell of you, right? And that is what they call a soothsayer. Maybe you could call it fortune telling. Somebody would know your spirit to tell you something. And so that's the kind of words that's being used here. And yesterday when we were doing that, I was saying that God says don't do that because that would be turning away from dependence of God to dependence of men. That men will show you something that you think is supernatural, but actually God says that's an absolute no-no. It's like worshipping other gods, but you're not worshipping a God. You're dependent on the dead, perhaps, or dependent on somebody who can see into the future or pretend to see into the future to tell you about yourself. And that's called familiar spirits, right? The mediums and spirits. And it says you prostitute yourself with them. Now, again, these are heavy words. And every time you see the word prostitution or fornication or adultery, God uses it, although literally in one sense when we get there, symbolically, when you go after other gods or you depend on other things besides God, it's called prostitution. It's play the harlot. Play the harlot. That you turn yourself away from God and give yourself to something else that is supposed to lead your life. So God says this, again, severe. I will set my face against that person and cut him off from his people. Remember, cut him off is to execute. So verse 7 says this, be holy. Remember, we have seen this in Leviticus 19. Be holy, for I am holy. So be holy yourselves. Keep yourselves separate from all these people. And it says here, be holy. Make yourself holy. Why? Because I am the Lord your God. And we read that in chapter 19. Very long chapter, but God keeps saying, I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord. Why? Because that is the character of God. And the moment we do something like this and play the harlot, turn to mediums and familiar spirits, God says, I don't want anything to do with me. And I will really be angry and I want you to be destroyed. And so God says, you shall keep my statutes. Guard them. This is what I want you to do. and perform them. Do them. I am the Lord. And so I am the Lord in verse 8 here is who sanctifies you. And this would be to say that to make holy. What does it mean to make holy? To separate you. To make you special. Now, you see, one of the things that God says, I want to make you special. I want to make you holy. Literally does not mean that God is going to zap you or God is going to change your mind or change your thoughts. God says, I want you to be holy. So you make yourselves holy. I tell you how to be holy, and you do exactly as I say. So that is the way how God makes a person holy. You see that? So it's got nothing to do with God zapping your heart, changing your mind. It is God telling you, I've given you what I, as God, I am the Lord, and my mind and my thoughts here, and this is how I want to make you holy, that I am sanctifying you. Okay, that itself is important. Okay. Now moving on to verse 9 onwards. Verse 9 is the end of this section. And it says this, that any man, you notice the word man, they keep saying man because man is the one that stands up to speak, to say things, right? To take the role of authority. So if you curse, what is curse here? Curse is kalal. And in this case, you find that it is to make despicable or to make a person of no value. Okay, so this is a very heavy word. We use the English word curse, but the actual word is to treat a person as of no value whatsoever. His father or his mother, and God says, surely be put to death. This is really, really serious. Surely die, right? Because he has made his father or mother as of nobody, right? That's what curse here means. His blood shall be upon him. He will be guilty. This is important because in the Ten Commandments, when God gave this, God wanted the Israelites to honor your father and mother, to kavod, to place importance, make them heavy. And you know, the Chinese word is 抬重, to treat as heavy, treat as important. And so in verse 9, if people do the opposite, meaning to treat them as dirt, to treat them as no value, that is what it means to curse. Then God says, you can die. You can die. And so this is very serious too. Why does God want to do that? It's because God wants us to learn to respect the elders. So filial piety, although it's a Chinese custom, may have come from here, that we are to honor our father and mother, to place weight, to treat them as important. And anyone who makes them of no value or treat them as no value, God will avenge for them. Why? Because the father and mother, as they grow older, would have no power, would have no strength. and the person who mistreat the elderly would be to go against God, because God looks after his own. And so this is very important for everyone to be very concerned for their father and mother. Now we go to the next section, which we have read in Leviticus chapter 18. Okay. In Leviticus chapter 18, and this, let me put it here as a marker, Leviticus 18. So very quickly, we just go through, we won't be going into great detail. But we need to know, whoever commits adultery, committing adultery would mean na'af. Na'af, I just give you the Hebrew word so that you understand. Na'af, right? Na'af. And committing adultery would be to have sex with somebody else's wife. So you notice here, yesterday was different, because if it was a concubine, a maid servant who is not free, then they would be punished. But today in verse 10 says, if the man commits adultery or have sex with another man's wife, and that would be a man's, an isha. You remember the word wife by context is the woman, so another man's woman, so to speak, right? And the Chinese always use that in the past, when the husband refers to the wife, he would say, this is my Loi Yan, and the wife would say, he is my Lam Yan. So it's only about man and woman. So husband and wife is actually a Western word, right? And so if he does that with his neighbor's wife, the adulterer and adulteress both, say God is fair, right, shall surely be put to death. So it's a death penalty. And now let me just clarify this. This would be when the two of them are willing parties. Because committing adultery is different from rape. Because in Deuteronomy, there's another situation where if the woman is not, but the man is forcing himself, has a different implication as well. So one of the things that you're beginning to see is that committing adultery is actually quite a narrow view. It has to do with another man's wife, not just any woman, which is contrary to modern thinking, right? And God says both must be put to death. If they willingly do that, they both must die. If the woman is not married, that's a different situation as well. So he who commits adultery with his neighbor's wife, with another man's wife, which is the same, right? With another man's wife, then both will surely be put to death. So let's be clear of that. Verse 11, the man who lies with his father's wife has uncovered his father's nakedness. This is, again, very clear. This has to do with Genesis chapter 9 about Ham. What did Ham do to uncover his father's nakedness? And this would be what it means. He lied. He had sex with the mother. Okay. Now, at this time in Leviticus 20, both of them, and these are all willing partners, both of them shall surely be put to death. You see this? Serious. Their blood shall be upon themselves, which tells us that they are both guilty. Cannot run away. God is very clear. If a man lies with his daughter-in-law, both be put to death. Again, your son's wife, right? Another man's wife. Although this is not just another man, daughter-in-law means your sons. Now, one of the things you find is that your son is one who has to listen to you. And if you do that to him, God says you'll be put to death. They have committed perversion. Verse 12, they have committed perversion. This is an abomination. This is a confusion of nature. And this is where it starts to come. When things are against how God has naturally put in place, right? Tavel. And God says, their blood shall be upon them. Both shall be put to death. Verse 13, if a man lies with a male as he lies with a woman. So if a man have sex with another man like he have sex with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. 13, an abomination. Also, tavel, so a perversion. Something against nature. They will surely be put to death. That's how serious. It's against God's order in nature. Their blood shall be upon them. Verse 14. If a man marries a woman and her mother, that's two women, right? The mother and the woman and her mother together, then it is wickedness. Now, we saw this word yesterday. This is called loose conduct. We translate as wickedness, and it's not exactly wicked. It's evil. It is lewd. It is like idolatry. It is against God. That's what it means. Loose conduct is that this is not the way relationships are supposed to be. Now look at what God is saying in verse 14. This is loose conduct, and they shall be burned with fire. Burned with fire, meaning they will die. Right? Both he and they, all three persons, that there may be no loose conduct in the land, in the midst of them. Loose conduct. Verse 15. If a man mates with an animal, he shall die. He shall surely die. What does it mean? If a man have sex, right? That's basically what it means. If a man tries to have sex with an animal, he will die. You shall kill the animal as well. The animal also must die. If a woman does that with an animal and have sex with an animal, then you shall kill the woman, right? And the animal. Both shall be put to death. So you notice this chapter is very serious. We have touched on this earlier, where it might look very casual, but this is serious to God. Their blood is upon them, and now we shall go to verse 17. If a man takes his sister, his father's daughter, his mother's daughter. Now there are three different relationships here. The sister, daughter, and mother's daughter. Now understand this, in the early days of Adam and Eve, in the early days of Noah after the flood, there were not many people. So how do they expand and grow and multiply? Well, Cain's wife was his sister. So it was not a problem at the early days, but it's a problem now in Leviticus chapter 20. Sees her nakedness means what? Not only see, and the word see is yada, ra'a, right? Ra'a is to see, to perceive, to look. But nakedness would be the shame, And in Leviticus chapter 18, we saw seeing nakedness is also another idiom to have sex. And then it says it is a wicked thing. This is considered a wicked thing, and by wicked, this would be a shameful thing. I think we use that word, shameful. So in Leviticus 20, it is now shameful, right? Shameful. And so he and they will be cut off in the sight of the people. He has uncovered his sister's wickedness, he shall bear his guilt. Now, this one, when he says he has uncovered his sister's wickedness, it would be just the man who has done that, right? And so he shall bear his guilt. He is guilty. So it's always incumbent on the man to do the right thing. And in the eyes of God, when this is not right, they will be cut off. And so God sees this as very serious. Verse 18, if a man lies with a woman during her, well, in this case, sickness, when she is unwell, right? Unwell. It could be unwell as sick. It could be unwell as weak. And it could be due to menstruation. And then you can see here the word uncovers her nakedness means to have sex with her. Then he has, in the English, it says exposed. And the word exposed here is uncovered, right? Uncovered. And this would be to disclose the weakness. Because she is bleeding, right? Expose her flow, and she has uncovered the flow of her blood. Then both of them shall be cut off from their people. You can see how serious it is. And this is also to do with blood, right? It's to do with blood, and it's to treat life with sanctity. And sex is not just any which way. And so here in verse 17 and 18, God describes exactly how it will be and what it cannot be. Verse 19, it says, if you uncover, again, to expose the nakedness of your mother's sister or your father's sister, that would be uncovering his near of kin. And all this, you must remember, it is to have sex with all these close relations, right? They shall bear their guilt. So all parties is wrong, right? All parties is wrong. So verse 20, if a man lies with his uncle's wife, means his father's brother's wife, then he has uncovered his uncle's nakedness. Remember, uncovering the nakedness of the wife or the woman that belongs to a man literally also uncovers the nakedness of the man. So when you uncover the nakedness of the father's wife, it would be uncovering the nakedness of the father. Same here. So the principle is correct because the father or the man who has the wife is the head of that relationship. And so uncovering one is equivalent to uncovering the man, right? And they shall bear their sin. They shall die childless. And this is even worse. They shall die childless. No children. And this is like a curse. Okay? If a man takes his brother's wife, this would be in the way where his brother is still alive. So verse 21, to take hold of, and this is not about to marry. This is really to, well, I would say that they have an affair, maybe, right? So God says it is an unclean thing. Unclean thing. Now, what do you mean unclean? It is impure. Unclean, impure. It is like idolatry. Can you imagine this? It's like idolatry. It's immoral. And that's how God looks at this. He has uncovered his brother's nakedness because the brother's woman, right? And they shall be childless. They shall be childless. That's the punishment. Next section, verse 22. And so after hearing all those severe words, there is a heavy heart. It's very sober, very solemn. It weighs down the heart to be very careful with our actions, what we do. And so God says, keep all that I have told you, my statutes and my judgments. That is like the end of chapter 19. Guard them. And then he says, and perform them. Do them. Don't just talk about them, right? And so that the land where I'm bringing you to stay will not vomit you out. And that's very interesting. The word vomit literally means to spew out of the mouth. And so when the land says that the land will spew you out or vomit you, it means to kick you out of the land. So now when they go into the promised land, it would be God saying that the land is now vomiting the inhabitants of Canaan out so that the Israelites can take over. But God is saying to the Israelites, if you don't keep my commandments, then the land will spit you out and spew you out, which actually happened. And you remember when it happened? The first time it happened was the Assyrians, the next time was the Babylonians. That is what God is warning them. And you shall not walk in the statutes of the nations which I'm casting out before you. This is statutes, the same thing. The nations that is before them has also their own processes and rules. And God says, don't follow them because that is not my rules. I am Jehovah. For they have committed all these things. The things I'm telling you not to do, they are doing. So if you don't do what they do, then you are holy. You are showing that you are different from them because I abhor them. I loathe them. I think that's the word. I loathe them. What do you mean by loathe? By loathe means God feels sick with them. It's very serious, right? Feels sick of them. And so God says, but I have said to you, you shall inherit their land, and I will give it to you to inherit a land flowing with milk and honey. I am the Lord your God. Remember, every time God says that, God is defining everything I've told you. It is telling you who I am. I am Jehovah Eloheka, right? Who has separated you. That's verse 24. When it says separate, this word actually means to divide out. And why do you divide anything? You divide means you are clearly making distinction between you and the people of the land who are there. I want you to be separated. I'm dividing you. And so the word holy carries this meaning as well. So you shall distinguish. Again, the word distinguish, separate. Notice English is just trying to put many English words so that you read it and sound nice, right? You shall divide between clean animals and unclean, between unclean birds and clean, and you shall not make yourselves abominable. What do you mean abominable? Abominable means to make filthy, which is unclean, right? There's another word, another way of saying it, polluting. When you are clean people and you do some of these things, it make you filthy, make you dirty. Don't do that by any beast or bird or any kind of living thing that creeps on the ground. And these are the things that God made in categories in Genesis chapter 1, which I have divided from you as unclean. So God has said that I have told you what is clean, what is unclean, and you should just stay away, right? Stay away. And verse 26 is this: you shall be holy to me, for I, the Lord, am holy, and have separated you or divided you. And this word literally means very clearly. And that's why in chapter 19, we say, you shall not sow seeds with, do your harvest with mixed seeds. Why? Because God is dividing them clearly from the people of the land, that you should be mine. And this is an honor which they have to understand. God is telling you, you are to be different. Why? Because you are my people. If we today are people of God, that we honor God, we look to God, we pray to God, we worship God, we serve God, and we are no different from the people around us, then we have violated God's name. We have not carried his name. We have carried his name in vain. We have treated his name as nothing. So that when we are in the world, we are like the world. And we can't tell a difference. And that would be very sad. And so God uses these passages to say, you behave differently, you dress differently, you do things differently, you eat differently, your hairstyle is different, the way you have relationships are also very different, and so on and so forth. And by doing that, the other nations can tell that you are a different people and you have a different God. Lastly, a man or a woman who is a medium, who has familiar spirits. So a medium here, remember, would be a channel to the dead. Okay? Who plays that role. And whether it can be done or not, I am highly suspicious, but they actually do practice and it cannot be proven. And so this could be, in a way, showing that they're leading men and women away from God. So a man or a woman who does this as a medium, pretend to be a channel to the dead, or has familiar spirits, soothsaying, that by the spirits or friendly spirits that I know of you, the person that is predicting or fortune telling, is to lead people not to trust God, but to trust them. What they say and what they claim the spirits say, right? Because you can't prove any of those anyways. And shall be surely be put to death. See, God is very serious. Stone them with stones. So how do you put them to death? Stone them. Their blood shall be upon them. And so it comes one full circle that God puts a dot to the end of the chapter, that he is serious. You want to be holy. I want you to be different from everybody else. This is what you are to me. Be holy. Be holy. With this, we end chapter 20. Any questions?
Pastor, verse 18, does it mean forced sex? That means having sex by force.
Well, I guess if you look at it this way, in verse 18, God says, both of them shall be cut off from their people, will imply that both are willing parties.
Willing
Right? God is a
parties.
fair God, right?
But I thought it is a forced sex because the lady is having sickness. She is sick. So I would take it as a
so we have this.
force.
She has exposed her flow and she has uncovered the flow of her blood. So there are two parties in action here. And so both of them shall be cut off. So in this case, if you look at verse 18, the text itself implies both parties in this condition. Yeah.
So
this
both
condition.
consented.
Both are consented, yes. But it's in a particular condition of her so-called sickness, her weakness, her menstruation. It has to do with blood, as I mentioned. And we've covered this, I think, a couple of chapters ago. Okay.
Okay.
All right. I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you, Pastor.